The Cape Breton Highlands National Park of Canada really is a crown jewel in Nova Scotia parks, and indeed of all of Canada. It includes 26 hiking trails for people of all different abilities. Now there's one trail that it seems people always ask, have you done that trail? Or it's on the bucket list for hikers. And that's Franey Mountain. And on this brisk morning, that's where I'm on my walkabout. Franey Mountain is located just west of Ingonish, on the eastern side of the national park. From sea level, it rises 430 meters, or 1,410 feet, to a commanding view from Ingonish to Cape Smoky. Parks Canada rates the Franey Trail as difficult on their three-tier scale, going from easy to moderate to difficult. They rate it that way for some of the inclines later in this hike. It's certainly not a hike you're going to be pushing strollers on. However, it is a Parks Canada standard trail, so you aren't talking about backcountry hiking by any means. In the summer heat especially, the biggest problem is people not bringing enough water or not being fit enough for the climb. Cape Breton Highlands National Park was established in 1936 and covers 950 square kilometers. That represents about 20% of the land area of northern Cape Breton. The park protects part of the maritime Acadian Highlands natural region. This hardwood, softwood forest stretches from the Great Lakes to New England and on to maritime Canada. This trail begins in the Ingonish area. Now, of course, the Mi'kmaq inhabited these lands for thousands of years before Europeans ever arrived. But in the 1500s, Portuguese fishermen began overwintering in what is now Ingonish. It's thought perhaps the name Ingonish is in fact Portuguese in origin. By 1802, English and Scottish settlers had set up a permanent settlement in the area. Of course, it too was based around fishing. These days, there are less than 2,000 people who live in Ingonish, and fishing is still the primary industry. Fishing and tourism. And that tourism is mostly because of this park. The national park, including the area around Franey, serves to protect a lot of very important species. Unfortunately, many animals that once roamed these forests are no longer here. The woodland caribou and eastern wolf are now extinct in the park, while the northern bat, little brown bat, and Atlantic salmon are endangered. Numerous other species such as the barn swallow, the yellow-banded bumblebee, and the common nighthawk are either threatened or of special concern within the highlands. One species that's not endangered in this park are moose, and you can sometimes run into them on the trail or at the trailhead. You can also see coyotes and bear. There are, of course, many other animals who call the park home, from eagles to marten, hare, and the endangered lynx. And those are the big animals. It can sometimes seem like there is nothing around you, but there are thousands of species of insect and other invertebrates living in the park, keeping this ecosystem going. These are the parts that really aren't good for strollers. If you don't like lizards and reptiles, you're in luck. There aren't very many of them in Cape Breton. They tend not to like the cold. The most common frog in the park is the green frog. And the most common snake is the garter snake. Neither are poisonous and neither bite. In a few places, Parks Canada has put stairs in to try and make the slope a little bit easier to climb. That's the difference between a Parks Canada trail and a backcountry trail. That's the Clybourne River and the Clybourne Valley. It's actually a geologic fault that creates this area. After the break, I'm continuing my climb to the Franey summit.
Feel the sunshine.
Golf is not something I know a whole lot about, but there is a connection between Franey and golf. In the same year that Parks Canada was creating the Cape Breton Highlands National Park, the province of Nova Scotia expropriated a large piece of land at High Head Peninsula to build Celtic Lodge, an absolutely stunning resort that was one of a number of government-owned resorts of the day. And at the same time, plans were afoot to build a golf course at the base of Franey, something which would help kickstart Cape Breton's reputation as a golf destination. Originally, the plan was for a 9-hole course beginning and ending by the lodge. But designer Stanley Thompson looked at the terrain and especially the Clybourne River flowing to the base of Franey Mountain and decided there must be 18 holes. Parks Canada got on board and the Highland Links was born as a mountains and oceans course. All because of the Clybourne River and Franey Mountain. Incidentally, Stanley Thompson is considered one of Canada's most well-known and respected golf architects. Highland Links is considered Thompson's masterpiece and is ranked by Score Golf as the 9th best golf course in all of Canada. And the number 1 and number 5 courses in Canada? They're newer courses, but they're also in Cape Breton. They're found on the other side of the island in Inverness. Cabot Cliffs and Cabot Links, respectively. The first tee at Highland Links is called Ben Franey. Ben Franey sounds like the name of a person, a gentleman by the name of Ben Franey, but that's not it at all. If you look at maps, this is called Franey Mountain or Ben Franey. Ben is Gaelic for hill or mountain. So then the question is, where does the name Franey come from? There were a number of Scottish immigrants here in the 1800s, some who located around the base of this mountain, so it's very possible that the mountain is simply named after those families. But the word Franey means hospitable or friendly, so it's also possible that this was simply named the Friendly Mountain. Northern Cape Breton has at least 631 native plant species. It also has 118 introduced species. Now those are plants which were brought to the area by humans, sometimes on purpose as garden plants, which then spread to other areas unintentionally, and sometimes plants that ended up here accidentally, for example on shipments internationally. One surprisingly introduced species is the lupin, and I find it fascinating that the lupin is an introduced species because they've become so much a part of Cape Breton's look and identity over time. Other introduced species include plants like the Japanese knotwood, ox-eyed daisy, and black-eyed Susan, as well as dandelions and purple loosestrife. The vegetation in northern Cape Breton is actually divided into 3 distinct regions. Acadian, which is for the most part a mix of hard and softwoods. Boreal, which is primarily softwoods like fir trees. And taiga, which is made up of scrub forest, barrens and bogs, areas very commonly seen throughout the Highlands. Another way you know this is a Parks Canada trail is the very helpful kilometer markings along the route. Franey is one of the highest peaks in the Cape Breton Highlands. The average elevation on the Cape Breton Plateau is about 350 meters, and Franey is 80 meters higher than that. Though there are mountains which meet or exceed even a 500-meter elevation. The Cape Breton Plateau is part of the Appalachian Mountain Range, which runs from Georgia all the way to Newfoundland. There are lots of little waterfalls and streams coming down from the peak of Franey Mountain. They really change with the seasons. The further up the mountain you go, the steeper it gets. The stairs do make it a bit easier though. I can actually smell that there's animals around at the moment. I can't see them. The peaks here aren't like the Rockies or Himalayas. Think more like worn down teeth. 70% of the park is plateau, and the peaks tend to be broad, flat-topped mountains. And the range is characterized by a gently rolling look with deep river canyons. Sometimes it's even hard to really know exactly what the highest point on a particular mountain is. Now over on the west coast of Cape Breton, in places like the Skyline Trail, you'll find dramatic cliffs falling off to the ocean below. But over here, on the eastern side, things slope a little less dramatically to the ocean below and include some sandy beaches along the way and low headlands. This is the Clybourne Valley, and that's the Clybourne River below. This fault isn't active anymore. Unlike the Rocky Mountains, which are still growing, the Cape Breton Highlands are basically in retirement. There's a trail down there that will take you through the Clybourne Valley, give you an entirely different perspective of Franey Mountain. The geologic history of this area is actually really interesting. At one time, the Cape Breton Highlands would have been neighbors with Morocco. Can you imagine? In fact, some of the same geology is found in both places. Dinosaurs would have once roamed this area too. But because the mountains have eroded so much, you don't find any evidence of fossils or footprints. These are very old mountains. I'm very fortunate to be up on the summit on a day that's so clear and with little to no wind. I don't think I've ever been in this part of Cape Breton and it be so still. People will tell you their stories of hiking Franey, and often involves being socked in by low-lying cloud or by fog. It still makes for a lovely hike, but of course you don't get the view. I'm going to take a few minutes to just soak in this moment. And then for me, it's down the trail and on to Ingonish.
Won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
The Franey Trail isn't that long, but climbing that mountain can sure build up a craving for caffeine and baked goods. And if you head a little ways into Ingonish, you'll not only find that, but you'll find some beautiful shops with handmade goods, you'll find ocean adventures, and even some beautiful beaches. I'm gonna stop here at Salty Roses and the Periwinkle Cafe. They have a nice little store with art. I can get my caffeine and baked goods. You can even stay the night if you want. There are many places you can visit in Ingonish. You could head back and check out the very historic Celtic Lodge, and maybe visit the trails around Middle Head. There's the Clybourne River Trail there too. If you golf, you could go to Highland Links, and if you remember my story from earlier, you'd be teeing off at Ben Franey. Coming into Ingonish, there's some really unique places, and places you can find handcrafted products. Next to me, in fact, is the Groovy Goat Farm and Soap Company, where you can get soap made from goat's milk. But you know, there's a reason why I did Franey early this morning, and that's because I'm hoping to make it around Cabot Trail to the western coast of Cape Breton Island by this evening. I hear it's really windy there today, but the sunset should be spectacular. Here on the top of Franey Mountain, you find the Skyline Trail, which is the most visited trail in all of Cape Breton Highlands National Park. It's also one of the most recognizable vistas in all of Nova Scotia. Moose. It's very common to see moose on this trail, and throughout the Cape Breton Highlands for that matter. People always seem to ask, did you see a moose on the Skyline Trail? And so this place has become a place to understand moose and their relationship with the Highlands. By the early 1900s, moose in this area had been hunted to near extinction. So, by the time the 1940s came, Parks Canada decided to try a reintroduction program, and it was successful. In the 1970s, budworm hit the spruce and fir forests in this area, decimating a major food source. But then birch emerged, and that turned out to be very tasty for the moose, who ate it almost down to a stump. It's not so often that you see a gate that you have to open and close as you walk down a trail. But that gate and this fence is intended to keep moose out of this area. Moose really are a problem. The park now has about 4 times the number of moose that the park can reasonably sustain. And more important than that, almost a third of the boreal forest in the Cape Breton Highlands has been turned into scrubland like this because of the moose feeding habits. With the moose eating the birch right down to stumps, it became important for scientists to understand exactly what impact moose were having on the regeneration of forests. And that's exactly what this enclosure is intended to do. This enclosure allows small animals to get in and out, but doesn't allow the moose in. That way scientists can see how forests in the area regrow with and without moose present. Now, interestingly enough, it is growing differently. It's much more of a savanna-like landscape. Regeneration of the boreal forest in the Cape Breton Highlands National Park is incredibly important. And what's going on here is they actually have test plots where they're trying different ways of regeneration. Everything from actually direct planting to trying to let it regenerate by itself. The hope is that one of these methods will be a way that they can use across the highlands. The sun is beginning to set, but this is the view people come for. The air, the wind, the water, it's all cold today. Harsh even, for much of the year in fact. But the waters along this coast are incredibly important to the environment. The 79,000 square kilometers of water in front of me is the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and it's a mix of the fresh water coming out of the St. Lawrence River and the salt water coming in from the Atlantic Ocean, and it makes for an incredibly diverse and vibrant ecosystem in that water. It's really important that you stay on the boardwalks in this area. You know, people have created their own paths going off to the side, and I was talking to one of the Parks Canada staff when I arrived here, and she was telling me about just how much damage some of the park goers are doing. And they're not doing it on purpose, but it is unfortunate because it damages the ecosystem. So stay on the boardwalk. Alexander Graham Bell is said to have remarked, "I have traveled around the globe. I have seen the Canadian and American Rockies, the Andes and the Alps, and the Highlands of Scotland. But for simple beauty, Cape Breton rivals them all." You know, people from Cape Breton call this area God's country. And I suppose that's a phrase that people from all different parts of the world use to describe wherever they're from. But wherever your next walkabout takes you, may you find yourself in God's country.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine. Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Feel the sunshine.